It was a day for the history books. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced she will not seek a leadership position in the new Congress, which starts its term in January. The announcement comes after Republicans won control of the House in the midterm elections. Here she is addressing the floor earlier today.
There is no greater official honor for me than to stand on this floor and to speak for the people of San Francisco. This I will continue to do as a member of the House, speaking for the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution. And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress.
We have a powerhouse roundtable of guests joining us today to further discuss this historic announcement. We have CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane on Capitol Hill. We have CBS News political contributor and former communications director and senior advisor to Pelosi, Ashley Etienne, who joins me at the table here, and CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joining us from the North Lawn. Welcome to all of you. A lot to unpack here. I want to start, Scott, with you because you're on the Hill. Pelosi announces that she's stepping down from leadership, but she's not without a succession plan. Take us kind of on the Hill today. What was it like, and who is this new slate of leadership?
The immediate reaction was, of course, tributes to the outgoing Speaker, the first and only woman to ever serve as Speaker. It's a historical moment, but the practical implications became quite a conversation as the day went on. There are immediate issues for the House Democrats. They've lost their best fundraiser. They've lost perhaps the best vote counter they've ever had on the House floor. And there's no firm succession plan yet. They've lost their entire slate of leadership after this Congress, because it wasn't just Speaker Pelosi. It was House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer of Maryland, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, who say they're also stepping back from leadership. All three of them said they're opening the door to a new generation of leaders, which raises the prospects of House Caucus Chair Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He didn't make his plans announceable today. He didn't make them public. A lot of people are keeping their powder dry in honor of the outgoing Speaker. But this is a seasonal change, a seismic change for the House Democratic Caucus, and it's happening as they're about to enter the minority with a very narrow margin for Republicans in the majority, where every vote is going to count, where Speaker Pelosi's vote counting skills may be sorely missed.
Yeah, Scott, that's such a great point. And Ashley, I want to pick up on that because not only is, the next leader going to have these challenges of counting the votes, but also what Scott mentioned about Pelosi's role as building the party infrastructure, being the prolific fundraiser that she is. What are some of these challenges for Democrats heading into a minority now without her at the helm?
Well, I mean, the benefit of going into the minority is that you actually get an opportunity to retool, refocus, re-engineer the party under new leadership. So I think that there's nothing but opportunity there for Mr. Jeffries or whoever takes over as the Speaker. But, also the benefits of being in the minority is you coalesce around one message. It becomes the objective becomes very clear. People fall in line. So I think this is going to be a really great opportunity to really do a reset within the caucus, redefine roles, reimagine the messaging and the vision for the House Democrats.
And Pelosi is going to stick around. She's not leaving Congress, so she's going to now be a backbencher. What will that kind of be like? I imagine it would be difficult for her not to assume some of the roles that she's assumed.
I mean, I've only known her to be a boss, so I can't imagine her not.
You know her so well.
Right, I can't imagine her not being the boss. You have to imagine, though, it's also going to be a little challenging for the new leadership that comes in because she'll be forever sort of looming, right? And I think there'll also be questions. I mean, you can just imagine a situation where she's run that caucus for so long and has been at the head of the table that she comes into a room and Mr. Jeffries might, or whoever it is, might say, we're going to go left, and then everyone turns to her and actually verifies whether or not we're going left. I think it's just going to be interesting to see how the entire caucus adjusts to it, but with her still being there.
I mean, one person that is very used to her being at the helm is Joe Biden, Ed, the president. He is now going to face a divided Congress for the first time in his presidency. Tell us a little bit about how you expect the Biden administration to navigate this without Nancy Pelosi as the leader of the Democratic caucus.
Well, first of all, a credit to Ashley for finding a positive way to spin the Democratic minority by suggesting it's a rebuilding rebuilding period. You sound like the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars or something by suggesting that, you know, going and having a bad year is good for the draft or something. My goodness, but good for you, Ashley. Thanks for trying. As for what they'll do here at the White House, look, they know Hakeem Jeffries, Catherine Clark, Pete Aguilar, but they don't know him the way the president knows Speaker Pelosi. The statement he put out today pointing out that they have known each other for decades. He knew her as a senator, a vice president, and now president, and that he thinks of her as one of the most dignified people who's ever worked here in Washington. They've been in the foxhole together now, especially this century, on a host of big issues, from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to passage of the Affordable Care Act, to repealing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy in the military, to all of the legislation passed by Congress in the last 2 years, which the historic and real breadth of it I don't think is going to be appreciated for several more years. Certainly that's what the White House would tell you. So it will be a bit of an adjustment for the president, who's going to have to, as he has, continue to defer to congressional leadership at times when, it's time for a rough and tumble negotiation now with Republicans. But what Pelosi's doing here is essentially making good on a promise she made to her younger colleagues 4 years ago, that she would step out of the way because she understands the party's in need of a next generation. And that's going to be quite a contrast to see these three, if it is indeed Hakeem Jeffries, and Ms. Clark and Mr. Aguilar leading the caucus as anticipated, alongside a president who's turning 80 on Sunday. But that comes at a time when the Democratic Party is saying they're seeking new blood. They want that next generation to step up. And there are Democrats who say the president should be stepping aside to allow somebody else to lead the party. So perhaps by her getting out of the way, Hoyer and Clyburn getting out of the way, it'll start to appease the concerns of Democrats that the next generation isn't being heard or allowed to do the job. So we'll see. It's going to require careful negotiation, careful coordination. But these three have been working methodically for the last 2 years, especially to build their team and to have enough votes in place to demonstrate to Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn that they could go and that these three would have the support needed to lead the caucus.
And Scott, speaking of those votes, I'm curious what this will mean for Republicans. You had Kevin McCarthy, who, is expected or, might, well, barring any news here, will likely become the speaker. He's still going to need some help from this leadership slate as they come up. Kind of explain to us, he's someone that was cheering that Nancy Pelosi has been fired now that Republicans have won the House, but he's still going to need Democratic support in a slim majority, right?
And it was noticeable that Kevin McCarthy was not in the House chamber when Nancy Pelosi gave those remarks today. And there is a burden on Kevin McCarthy, assuming he gets the votes to become the next House Speaker, to build a relationship with the new Democratic leadership, because you can see coming down the path, there are going to be big votes on big things in which he might need some Democratic votes. Think about the debt ceiling, which that crisis could be coming next year. Think about keeping the government functioning, government spending, preventing shutdowns. He might need a coalition of Republicans and Democrats because his majority is slim, and there are any number of factions inside that may not give their votes to Kevin McCarthy. So there's a burden coming his way, the need to develop a new relationship with whoever takes over as Democratic leader. I'll tell you something else, Caitlin, and I want to bring this question to Ashley, if you can indulge me. There's a pretty healthy skepticism on the Hill late today that Nancy Pelosi would serve a full term as a backbench member of the House, going to those sometimes painful 10 a.m. committee hearings or subcommittee hearings and sitting at the end of the dais. Ashley, do you think she would serve a full term as a backbencher?
Scott, that's such a good question. We were just talking about that earlier. I can't imagine it. It's just really so hard to imagine. But here's the benefit is that when you look at the Democratic leadership, the ones that'll replace, the members that'll replace the current leadership, none of them, to my knowledge, have been deeply involved in high-stakes negotiations. Yeah. So nor has McCarthy, to my knowledge. And so the Democrats will have an advantage because they'll have the speaker still, or I should say, Representative Pelosi, still around to help navigate them through really, really high stakes negotiations. And the one thing we do know about her is there's no one who can outperform her when it comes to high stakes negotiations. So I think that's going to work to her advantage. But Scott, you raise a good point. I can't imagine her in hearings. I can't imagine her being a full backbencher, but I do see her being sort of an advisor emeritus to the actual caucus and to the leadership.
Caitlin, I'm glad Scott brought this up because this is actually something I was going to mention as well. She may not have a choice. Hoyer, Clyburn don't necessarily have a choice in stepping down. If the margins are going to be 4 or 5 seats and Republicans go through with their vow to end proxy voting or the ability to phone it in, literally, and that they have to be there, attendance issues, the health of 435 lawmakers now become critical, and you cannot spare a vote in that situation. So, you know, if she were to step down, the governor would have to call an election within 14 days, and then the election would have to be held within 4 months. Can Democrats afford to lose a seat that long if there are close and careful negotiations over budget or immigration or issues like gun policy and, you know, funding matters for Ukraine? That's part of why none of them can go anywhere right now, because the margins are going to be so close, and it's a dynamic we've not seen in the modern era. That's really going to affect what the House, if anything, can get done next year.
Yeah, certainly a new era indeed. Well, Scott MacFarlane, Ashley Etienne, and Odo Keefe, thank you all so much. We appreciate your time and reporting. We'll talk to you soon.